a quorum here and an audience and an engaging agenda. We're looking forward to this conversation with a couple of really nice topics. I do remind everyone to turn your cell phones off or on silence, please. Also, always like to introduce our lead staff, Brandon White, and our acting committee assistant, Brett Gillespie. Brett, would you please call the roll for us?
Senator Berg, Senator Neal, Senator Westerfield, Representative Brown.
Here.
Representative Kulkarni. Representative Timoney.
Here.
Mr. Davis. Ms. Drake. Mr. Jones. Dr. Oleka.
Here.
Mr. Roberts. Chairman Gibbons.
Present.
Chairwoman Hebron.
Present.
And pleased to share the gavel with my co-chair, Representative Hebron. Representative Hebron, do you have any opening comments you wish to make?
I do briefly. I actually would like to welcome my guest today from Hardin County, part of my district. We've got Sherry Johnson with Lincoln Trail Area Development District. We've got Myra Covalt with the Workforce Development Board, and Baptist Health Hardin. It's always a Hardin Memorial Hospital to me. That's where I was born. Yes. Dr. Danielle Level and Julia Springsteen, who's a city councilwoman in Elizabethtown. So I'm very excited to have people from home here today, and I'm proud to call them my friends.
Great segue to our first presentation. If the three of you would like to come onto the table, and as you come to the table, I'm going to briefly act on a couple of business matters that we always like to do. The first of those being, we remind everyone about the commission purpose. It's always good to be guided by a purpose. As found in statute, the purpose of the commission shall be to conduct studies and research on issues where disparities may exist across the sectors of educational equity, child welfare, health, economic opportunity, juvenile justice, criminal justice, and any other sectors that are deemed relevant in an effort to identify areas of improvement in providing services and opportunities for minority communities. After reminding us all of our purpose for being here, it's a good business matter to move on the minutes from last month's meeting, so the chair would entertain a motion to accept the motion and second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. The motion is adopted to approve the August the 23rd, 2022 minutes. I think you've done a nice job of introducing our group that's here at the table. The theme for this month, if you are following the themes that we're trying to build around the months, this month's theme is on justice, and we've asked representatives from the Lincoln Trail Area Development District to provide a detailed overview of the work that you're doing on your Workforce Crisis Task Force. And with that, please introduce yourselves for the record and proceed with your presentation.
Myra Covalt.
Dr. Danielle Lovell.
Julia Springsteen. Good afternoon. My name is Myra Covalt. I am currently manager of special projects for Baptist Health Hardin, located in Elizabethtown, Kentucky. I'm also here as first chair of the Lincoln Trail Area Development District's Workforce Development Board. It is in this latter capacity that I will share opening remarks. Our Workforce Development Board started on a strategic planning process to address the workforce supply shortage in 2017-2018 and formed a Workforce Crisis Task Force to help the board increase the workforce participation rate in the region. The COVID-19 pandemic and the Great Resignation that continues is causing this shortage to grow significantly and is of growing concern for our region as we prepare for the arrival of the Blue Oval SK Battery Park. We must get more people interested in rejoining the workforce. Our initial plan focused on three areas. The first, business engagement, getting more businesses engaged in discussions and solutions to the workforce supply shortage. The second, unlocking local potential, developing more work experience opportunities with our high school students to introduce them to the employment opportunities in the region, and then convincing them to stay or return after pursuing higher educational technical training opportunities. And lastly, removing obstacles, identifying those obstacles and identifying solutions that prevent some individuals from participating in the workforce. We want to share one success story with you today that centers on justice-involved individuals, I would like to turn this over to my colleague, Dr. Danielle Lovell.
So I'm Danielle Lovell, and I'm an associate professor of sociology with Western Kentucky University, and I'm the co-chair of the Removing Obstacles Committee with my partner, Julia Springsteen. Thank you for the opportunity today to speak regarding our criminal justice system and the challenges of workforce development. Before we get started, I want to take a moment to recognize someone important to this process that is not with us today. The program we will share started as an idea from City Councilwoman Tanya Seabrooks of Radcliffe, who passed away in 2020. If she had not planted the seed, we might not be here today talking about this project. She was passionate about creating opportunity for our neighbors who handle the challenges of life after incarceration, and this is but one example. So I'm going to set some context for you. As a result of incarceration and other contact with the legal system, more than 70 million people in the United States have a criminal record. Using the Administrative Office of the Court's quick search, which, as a professor, I would have loved to have dug down, deeper and drilled into the data, but this was kind of quick. I calculated that from 2012 to 2022, we had 2,172,414 felony and misdemeanor cases go through our circuit and district criminal courts. This is number of cases. It's not convictions or accounts for duplication, but let's just pretend for a moment that 25% represent those now with convictions on their record. That is 543,103 Kentuckians. We know that there are both formal and informal sanctions that continue to follow people when they get out of prison, including those that impact their ability to get a job. For example, they're not eligible for certain professional licenses, job opportunities, public benefits, voting, and even things like housing benefits. They have the economic impact of missed educational opportunity and occupational opportunities. Many of these formal sanctions, we know that they're codified. No matter your crime, small or large, the formal sanction remains the same for you. Further, there are informal sanctions that continue not only to follow them, but their families and their communities as a result of this incarceration. Stereotypes such as they are not redeemable, or they're untrustworthy, or not a good bet follow them. All of our community members coming out of prison face these challenges. However, they are compounded and heightened for our neighbors of color. Reentry is a racialized process. For example, in a study first conducted by Pager in 2003 and replicated over the years, Black men without a felony record have the same chance for a callback as a white man with a felony record. The racial benefit of the doubt factor, as I call it with my students, is lessened by a criminal conviction for our Black community members. We are less likely to give them the benefit of the doubt. We have to acknowledge the labor market conditions with a focus on the racial disparities, such as differential access to job networks, differences in distribution of employment opportunities, including issues of residential segregation and even discrimination by employers. Given the amount of stigma surrounding those who are or were justice involved, including how the general public associates the word criminal with several undesirable traits, we have to consider how we as legislators, employers, and community members stigmatize, either knowingly or unknowingly, this group of people. We know that access to employment is a major protective factor when it comes to recidivism. Employment helps to create new networks and social capital, routine, autonomy, and increased self-efficacy. However, many of the jobs that are even considered felon-friendly, like construction and manufacturing, show an aversion to hiring particularly Black community members. They find themselves in precarious work situations such as the gig economy and low-wage work that leads to a decline in job stability and the length of time with any one company. To address these challenges, policies and programs have been created to help mitigate these circumstances. One of the most popular is having those who are incarcerated gain credentials while in prison. In a recent study out of Cornell, the researcher found that these credentials act as a double-edged sword when it comes to how helpful they are in gaining employment. From that work, we know that employers often interpret these credentials negatively rather than seeing them in a positive light as someone who is trying to better themselves while they were incarcerated. Which leads me to our presentation today. In order to get more people employed, we need employers willing to look beyond preconceived notions and biases and give folks another chance. We can create programs all day long for those coming out of prison, but if the programs are not aligned with the labor market reality of employers who might be on edge about giving that job, then all that work is for naught. We are also here today to talk about race in those employment opportunities. When we target our interventions to work on the issues that impact some groups more than other groups, we rise the tide for all. When we look at our policies, programs, attitudes, and even our own biases about one group and make sure we are addressing the toughest challenges around them, it impacts all people. The story we will eventually share is a former student of mine. And I believe this is a program that can lift those up who most need the help breaking down the barriers to employment while providing benefit to anyone with a criminal record. It is a program that focuses on education of employers and our community members about those with criminal records. It is also an earned benefit from the employer to the employee. There is mutual benefit, and I hope we can create more of these kind of conversations and programs because creating more stability for our already fragile community members benefits us all. My colleague, Julia Springsteen, will now talk about the specifics of this program.
Thanks, Danielle. Good afternoon. My name is Julia Springsteen. I serve on the Elizabethtown City Council in addition to my role on the Lincoln Trail Workforce Crisis Task Force. We've all said it without stuttering so far. Kentucky has several industry categories that can benefit from an increased workforce. Leisure and hospitality are at the top. Machinery repair and actually nonprofits, to name a few, are recovering from the pandemic at a slower rate than other industries. Encouraging businesses to expand their thinking about employment will have positive results not only for the businesses, but the employee and their family. Data shows that people who receive expungement saw their wages increase on average 25% within 2 years. These increased wages obviously lead to a larger tax base, which directly benefits the Commonwealth. Of course, workforce participation was an issue long before the pandemic. In developing the program with Hardin Memorial Hospital, now Baptist Health Hardin, we strive to keep it very simple. As the expungement agreement reads, upon recipients' fulfillment of upfront expenses to initiate the expungement process, which is $40 for an expungement certificate, the hospital will provide the recipient with an expungement benefit of up to $1,000 for each 12 months of continuous employment. The maximum benefit will not exceed $5,000. The expungement benefit will be issued only at the time recipient is eligible for expungement as deemed by the county from which the convictions originated. Expungement benefit will be issued payable to the appropriate clerk's office upon receipt of the expungement certificate. The price varies because this also will apply to misdemeanors. As Danielle's research indicates, most employers don't really see a difference between jaywalking and a felony sometimes. A record is a record. And so this was we tried to simplify it and just keep it broad as far as what the field of what could be expunged. Unfortunately, many employers do not know that there are federal programs that can assist with this. The Work Opportunity Tax Credit provides up to $2,400 for an employee with a felony conviction. The federal bonding program will issue a bond as soon as the applicant has a job offer and a scheduled start date. And this includes workers who are hired through temp agencies, which many of our region's factories use. The General Assembly has made notable changes in fees to address some of the challenges our justice-involved neighbors face. An additional change that is needed is to reduce or eliminate the waiting period for expungement. Right now, a person is not eligible for expungement for 5 years after any time is served and their probationary period is over. Due to the expense, many go well past the waiting period before attempting expungement or never try if they're not able to save money for the fees. Eliminating the wait time would allow an employee working with their employer in a program such as ours to clear their record even sooner, many within 2 years. With the current waiting period, they're essentially serving more time while we expect them to build their lives back. We have some very unrealistic expectations of people sometimes. This expungement program is just one tool in eliminating barriers to success for Kentucky businesses and families. The other barriers our subcommittee addresses are childcare, transportation, and housing. And these barriers cannot be fully eliminated without true public-private partnerships, such as House Bill 499 last session, and we appreciate the work that y'all put into that. We have amazing opportunities ahead of us, but left unaddressed, these opportunities will become additional barriers to Blue Oval SK and other incoming industries that our region will hopefully host or is already hosting, frankly. And now Myra Koval will wrap up our presentation with an employer's perspective on the expungement program. I appreciate your time and the invitation to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lovell and Ms. Springsteen, on setting the stage for how employers can be part of the solution. My previous role at Baptist Health Hardin, which was formerly Hardin Memorial Health, was Vice President of Human Resources. It was in this capacity that I became involved in an initiative to introduce an expungement program as a means of providing employment opportunities while allowing those with eligible felony convictions to set aside funds to be used toward expungement of those convictions. In 2019, I attended the Workforce Development Board's annual Workforce Summit, in which one of the presentations by Dr. Lovell and Ms. Springsteen focused on barriers to employment for those with felony convictions. They introduced a video, which you will see shortly, of one young woman's challenges to save enough money to use toward expungement of her felony convictions. She shared it was either save towards her expungements or pay her mortgage. She chose to keep a roof over her family's head. I watched this video as the Chief Human Resources Officer of the third largest employer in Hardin County, knowing we struggled, like many other businesses in our area, to hire and retain a workforce, especially in entry-level positions for which felony convictions did not specifically preclude someone from employment consideration. Based on our need, I volunteered to work with Dr. Lovell and Ms. Springsteen to develop a program that would allow Hardin Memorial Health to hire eligible individuals into high turnover positions and set aside funds earned for every year of employment that would then be earmarked for expungement costs. I also learned that the young woman featured in this video, Timmy Michelle Tolhurst, was already an employee of HMH, and that Dr. Lovell and Ms. Springsteen had been assisting her with her expungement goals. We used Ms. Tolhurst's situation as an opportunity to develop an employment-based expungement program, centering on HMH accruing $1,000 for every year of employment. In Ms. Tolhurst's case, she had been an employee in good standing long enough to earn the funds to offset all expungement-related costs. Dr. Lovell and Ms. Springsteen initiated the expungement process, and HMH issued a check payable to the appropriate circuit court, resulting in Ms. Tolhurst's convictions being expunged. I come to you today in hopes that other employers and businesses see the opportunity available in offering such an expungement program. HMH, and today as Baptist Health Hardin, continue to offer this program in hopes that others are not forced to make the same decisions as Ms. Tolhurst did, mortgage and food or expungement. In a world where workforce recruitment and retention are the top challenge being faced for employers, we must consider all available options to allowing anyone wanting to work a pathway to employment. Thank you for the opportunity, and that concludes our written statements.
And we now have a video.
Oh, right, sorry, thank you. The best part.
The best part
The
is
best
Timmy's
part.
story.
Best part.
In March of 2010, I was arrested and had some drug charges placed against me. It was my first arrest, never been in trouble. I had a boyfriend that was addicted to OxyContin and trying to help him out instead of reaching for outside help, which I understand is dumb, but just trying to help him out, and ended up I was arrested. He had an addiction problem, so he got thrown into rehab. I got 2 felony counts on that, and I ended up pleading guilty in January of 2011 to the 2 felony counts, placed on 5 years probation. But I worked 3 jobs just to make sure my bills were paid. So I went back to school, graduated in May of 2016 with my bachelor's. But with that mistake, here I am 9 years later, still having to pay for that price and work multiple jobs, do self-employment on the side to try to earn just a little bit of extra money. And I have a bachelor's degree that I'm paying student loans on, but not that I don't use that degree, but I can't find employment in that degree. Unfortunately, it's a little pricey right now, and I can look at it and say, okay, I can file this paperwork for $500, or my house payment's $570.
We have to find something
that supports people when they come out of jail, that allows them to see employers willing to hire them regardless of these felony convictions, and also be willing to invest in them for the future. The program is designed for employers to assist employees with the expungement process and the associated costs to remove these qualifying Class D felony convictions from their record.
A person is eligible for expungement if they have a misdemeanor or Class D felony convictions. If they were acquitted or the charges were dismissed, that's also on the record. Or if they receive a pardon from the governor, then they're eligible. These don't include convictions for sex offenses or offenses against a child. But they only become eligible for expungement 5 years after completion of their sentence, probation, and that includes paying fines.
As an employer, we have a need for workforce, especially in areas where retention is a challenge. And I think I can speak for a number of employers in the area where they are looking for dedicated workers that will stay over the course of time. And I just remember being inspired by Timmy's story and saying, we have to create the pathway for these individuals to gain employment. And I just thought, if she wants to work and we have a need, why not partner together? And then the part of her story that really touched me was, there are moments where you choose to either pay for rent or pay for expungement costs. That's a no-brainer. And so expungement kind of goes by the wayside. And I just felt like we could be the example to local employers to create a way for them to take a chance on individuals who want to work, in the hopes that, over the course of time, we are able to offer funds to individuals to offset costs of expungements. They get their goals of having a clean record. We have a retained employee who is now ingrained in our culture and believes in what we do in our mission, and we are able to retain talent over time. And I think that's what any employer wants to do.
Felons aren't always bad people. You make one mistake, sometimes that's a misdemeanor and you don't see it, sometimes it's a felony and you do. Just the other day, I received notification, actually after my newborn was born, that my record was expunged. And then last week, I had a background check run and it came back clean for the first time in 10 years. So that was pretty exciting to see that, and just how amazing that can be, not only in my life, but into other people who haven't had that support, who need that support.
Well done. Very well done. Thank you for the presentation. We do have some committee members with questions. Representative Timoney.
Thank you, Chairman.
My first symptom was a dry cough.
That was my first symptom as well. So,
Like
Representative Timoney, was that your first symptom?
Not sure what was happening there.
Take a look at
I was
the packaging.
confused, which is not unusual for me.
Please proceed.
Heard the laughter there, Dr. Alika. Thank you for the presentation today. This was outstanding. A lot of thought-provoking statements and things for me to think about as we leave. Dr. Lovell, for you in particular, you made a statement that that potential employers, look at credentials earned while incarcerated poorly. Why is that, do you think?
Sure. So what the study out of Cornell was showing us is that because of how many preconceived notions that the general public typically has about those who are maybe incarcerated, that when they see that they earn those credentials in prison, again, it's that barrier of that preconceived notion. Even though, to me, I look at it positively, but I have long worked with the justice-involved community. And not only that, I am a family member with a sister who has felony convictions. And so I understand it from a personal level. And so, again, it's really working with employers to help them to understand and to get past some of those preconceived notions they have about, well, what's going to happen if I hire somebody with a felony conviction. And it was a surprising finding because, we implement these programs across the country, right? And on the surface, it's like, yes, of course, this is gonna, you get your masonry or you get HVAC or you get, any of these credentials, but you've also got to put on that resume the school that you attended. And when it might say, Eddyville Penitentiary, an employer sees that, that's a little, that's right there for them, might be say, okay, this is not going to go any further, when they might have a really amazing employee. And so, yeah, we have a lot of work to do with education of employers.
Thank you, and I think that's to echo what you said. I know that investments are being made in equipping individuals. GED, CDLs is a really hot one across the country now, and I would want to make sure. I view it the same way that you do. I'm that optimist that if you're gonna put that effort in and go above and beyond and earn something and learn something, that it should pay off for you. Do you believe that this is a stigma that will lessen in time? Is this something that the business community needs to talk more about and have open discussions about?
So I'm very excited that the end of October, I'll be attending the Chamber of Commerce. They're doing an entire day on diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workforce. And they're going to be having these conversations with employers. And that's an important first step in really opening the lines of communication and having meaningful conversation about what this means for people who are coming out of our prisons, and the kind of hopes and dreams they have for themselves even when they come out, and the impacts on their families that if they can achieve getting that job. As I said before, it's a very protective factor. So I commend the Chamber of Commerce for having that event on October 26th to begin that conversation. And so, yes, I absolutely agree that having conversations of diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging, really, with employers, it has to be the other side of the puzzle. We can try to get people's skills built up all day long, but if it doesn't match that people will hire them, then that's very frustrating for the people who we tell them, if you just do the work, but then you can't get the job, that's really heartbreaking, and further reduces their self-efficacy. So thank you.
Thank you.
Senator Westerfield, you're next. Representative Cole Carney, you're on deck.
Thank you, Chairman. Ladies, thank you for the presentation. I do have a couple of questions, and I had to step out for a phone call, so I may have missed it. You were talking about the changes to expungement regarding fees, the length of time they've got to wait before they can access the expungement relief. But I missed where you connected that to its impact on minorities, people of color. Did you give any data on that in particular? I mean, I've heard the arguments about that in this building for a number of years, even since before we enacted some expungement legislation. But I didn't catch anything that specifically tied it to its impact on minority populations.
So I did not talk about that in my opening remarks. There is, of course, data and literature out there about that particular issue. We know that there are those heightened impacts. We know that the challenges are greater for communities, for people of color, whether it's Black people. I'm Native American. We see the same thing in our tribal communities. And so, but if you're interested, I can certainly get you some more pinpointed information and data to help you with that. I just don't have it on me right now.
I would like to have that, specifically if it's specific to Kentucky, so we can understand its impact on those populations here in the Bluegrass. And then another question I had, and I really struggle with this. I've been one of the impediments to more, I'll say, gracious expungement legislation. I wish the fee hadn't been reduced. The Supreme Court issued an order in a case, I believe it was last year, that impacted the fees and indigent applicants for expungement. I disagreed with the court's position. Having been a prosecutor, I've stood there in the courtroom. Now, there are plenty of people, regardless of race, there are plenty of people who are criminal defendants who don't have a pot to pee in. But there are a bunch that put on a really good show while they carry two, $1,000 smartphones, and they're wearing nicer clothes than the secondhand Dawa hair suit that I had for a time as a prosecutor, and got into nicer cars when they're done with their hearings. And so I'm not crazy about reducing the fee. I say all that to highlight the quote from the video that you said. And the quote was, and you may have said this in the video, you may have said it here this morning, you've got someone who wants to work, and we have a need. I guess I'm asking why you need any expungement change in the first place, because that's just a piece of paper that creates a legal fiction that makes it look like someone who applied didn't do what the system in fact convicted them of having done. It gives you some peace of mind, I suppose. But if that person needs to work and you have the need, there's absolutely nothing stopping Baptist Health or any other employer from hiring those folks. Now, I understand that there are people who are reluctant, they're employers, and that's a very legitimate issue. But you were making the argument that you've got a need and you've got someone to work, and you need this expungement to make that happen. No, you don't. You do not. So I don't know why. I don't feel compelled to make a bunch of... We've already made expungement possible, first of all. The fee has been reduced over my objection. Some of them have been made automatic. You don't have to apply for some expungements anymore. So I guess I'm curious why we need to make any changes. I completely agree with your sentiment, though, that education needs to be done amongst the private sector. I say education. I want more employers to be willing to hire people that are in a second chance hiring situation or a fourth chance hiring situation. Because if they can be employed, it does more than anything else to prevent them from coming back to the criminal justice system. But you don't necessarily need the legislature to make that possible. You need the private sector to give more grace, I suppose. Anyway, I don't know if that was much of a question so much as a speech, but I guess I'm just not convinced that there are changes that we can make. Because creating more paths to expungement or quicker paths or cheaper paths to expungement still won't change employers. It might help keep you from having to convince employers that those people are worth hiring. That doesn't get us anywhere.
Presenters, you have a chance to respond if you wish.
Sure. I don't know that I'll address your comment specifically. As the employer in the group, I think in today's world, and even when this Timmy's situation was first brought to my attention, hiring, recruitment and retention is every HR executive's nightmare and continues to be. And it was one of those opportunities where someone wanted the opportunity to work, and as an employer, we had positions available. And so I think it was really it was a moment where we could help each other, allow for an example for an employer to put together a program that would allow individuals to set aside funds toward expungement. They could then have the private sector to be able to point to as an example to those others employers. And so I guess from my perspective, I want our work to be an example for other employers, the private sector, to look to and to say, we made it work, you can as well. As to the costs of expungement, as an employer, I want to do what I can to help our employees attain their goals. In this particular case, it was expungement related. And so, again, I'm not going to address your specific comments. I just, employers should want what's best, not only for their company, but for their employees, because in feeling that way, the business benefits as well. And so it was from that perspective that we felt like we needed to help Timmy and her goals, and that was working with Dr. Lovell and Ms. Springsteen around establishing an expungement program.
Senator Westfield, you wish to respond?
I do. It might help to ask a more specific question. Do you hire people with felony convictions, or do you have to have an expungement?
At the time an offer of employment is made, we aren't aware of that individual's criminal record. We are made aware after an employment offer has been extended. That's when the background check is completed, and it's at that point that we would know. And then as long as it is not directly relevant to the requirements of the position, the employment process continues. And so we don't need an expungement at the time the offer is made. However, again, I'll go back to if an employee sees that we are partnering with them in helping them attain their goals, in one of which is perhaps that they want those records expunged, then we want to be able to help them
and you
with
all
that.
should be applauded for that, commended for that. I think doing that not as a condition of employment, but as something you're doing for a staff member that you just want to help, I think that's great. And I wish all employers did that. And I wish all employers had the same position you did, that you'd hire a convicted felon so long as that didn't have some impact on the work they were going to be asked to do. Not all of them will, and I wish they all would. You're to be commended on that. Just not sure what legislatively we can do to improve upon that. One of the biggest debates that we have up here is not just about the fee and the length of time you've got to wait before you can apply, but which offenses should even be expungible at all. We've got a statute, 439, 3601, or 3604, something like that. I may have just butchered that reference, but it's the violent offense statute that dictates that for certain offenses listed in that statute, the parole eligibility rate is 85% instead of the standard 20%. Though some are at 50% as well. But there's a whole host of offenses that don't fall under that statute, but that there's general agreement that those offenses are morally reprehensible, and there's a lot of heartburn about giving that sort of second chance. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Absolutely. We have a number of members with questions, but I want to follow briefly on something you said in responding to Senator Westerfield. You used a phrase directly relevant to the position, and that combined with an earlier statement about.
Should I gavel you down? He still had a following question. Since you gavelled me down that one time.
Directly relevant to the position, and then also an earlier statement related to license opportunities for convicted felons. So expound on that for just a moment. What do you mean when you say specifically relevant to the position?
So in the case of healthcare, someone that has a conviction that is perhaps abuse related will not be considered in a position that is providing or working directly with patients. Another example might be if we have a finance-related position. If someone has a conviction that is passing bad checks or something that is going to be finance-related, the conviction must be directly relevant to the position for us to rescind the offer. Outside of that, another example might be someone who has DUIs. As long as they are not operating a vehicle on our behalf, that will not preclude them from being considered for employment. That
does. That
Okay.
helps. Thank you. The licensure question?
Well, I wanted to follow up on that, because when she also talks about helping people obtain their goals, if they want to move further in their education, like Timmy Michelle, she got a degree and then found that even because she had that kind of a drug conviction, she wasn't able to work in the area she wanted to. What do we do? What do we do about those kind of situations where they've paid their debt to society? They are working really hard every day to remain, a law-abiding citizen, and probably would be phenomenal in some positions that could impact other people, other kids, of other individuals that maybe have some of the same experiences, but they can't work in those fields. I also think it's important to recognize that if you've got an employee that is dedicated to your company, they may want to move up in that company. And let's say that there are restrictions that a national corporation may not make, but if the employer can help them get that record expunged, then they can move up. And so it's kind of that, it's kind of that balance. It's that balance between, what Senator Westerfield is talking about. He sees the worst of the worst in his job. I mean, that's just the way it is. But there's also a lot of room between the worst of the worst and what we're often talking about in terms of, these convictions inhibiting people to being able to pursue other goals other than entry-level positions.
Good, thank you. Senator Westfield, did you have a brief follow-up? Okay, thank you. Representative Colcarney, you're next, and Co-Chair Heveron's on deck.
Thank you, Chairman. And I have a couple of questions, I think, for Ms. Springsteen, but I'd like to address very briefly, if I could, a couple of comments that Senator Westerfield made. And believe it or not, I disagree a bit with his position. I think, fundamentally the issue is that a person commits a crime, they're convicted of a crime, they are sentenced, and they complete the sentence. I think once that debt is paid, they don't need to keep paying for it. I understand the concerns, and reasonable people can disagree on which offenses can be expunged, and I think that is maybe the heart of the question, rather than how much are we going to reduce the cost of expungement, because once you decide it can be expunged, I don't think there should be a cost at all, because that decision has been made by a very, comprehensive thought process as to which offenses can and cannot be removed from the record. And of course, the issue is if you've completed your debt to society and you want a clean slate, that clean slate means that your background is not flagged by an employer when doing a background check. Because that, unfortunately, again, in an ideal world, every employer would be aware of that not every offense is the same and would take the time to talk to them and figure out what happened and are they a good fit, et cetera. But that doesn't happen, and a lot of employers just don't have the resources or the time to get into those kinds of conversations. And frankly, if they're a company that are contracting with a state government, federal government, there are a lot of positions that would just preclude that conversation entirely if anything shows up on the background check. So that's just it's just an equity issue in terms of what do we mean when we say your debt is paid? What do we mean when we say you can start with a clean slate? That being said, my questions were kind of, I think you brought up funding, and you had mentioned there's a federal bond, and you mentioned $2,500. You mentioned a few amounts, $5,000. I was wanting to ask you, what is that flow of funding? Like, do you all use any of that in this program that you've implemented, or is this something that employers can directly avail themselves of?
It's federal funding. The Work Opportunity Tax Credit, it actually will provide, it has a number of different categories that it will provide an employer funding for if they, basically take risk on these certain types. It includes disabled veterans. It includes people with felony convictions. I just mentioned specifically it's $2,400 for an employee with a felony conviction if they work or after they work up to 120 hours for that employer. They can apply through that to get, and so they need to be employed for a little bit of time, and then they can get the support for the tax credit. And that's a federal program. And also the federal bonding program is offered, and there's information through the Kentucky Career Center for that. An employer can apply for a bond, again, as soon as the applicant has a job offer and a start date. And this goes to temp agencies as well. So if if an employer is taking what they see as a risk on hiring this person, then they'll have a bond to back up anything for theft or embezzlement or anything like that might happen, theft or damages. And so it's just opportunities that employers, especially small businesses, that they can avail themselves of if they're willing to expand their perspective on hiring.
The $5,000 I think you were speaking of is the max amount of the expungement program award that we designed our program around. That's the maximum amount. And honestly, it was a number that to start with, it was a brand new concept for us. Luckily, I remain very close with Human Resources, and it's something that we continue to discuss. So why 5,000? It was a number to start with.
I think when we were initially trying to develop, we just wanted to have a broad range so that anybody could be included if they were eligible. And so that's what they started with.
And also, I want to mention that the changes to the law took place kind of midstream to when we were doing our work. And so that the costs were more expensive previously. And so when we were first batting around that number, that kind of went into it as well, is what the previous costs were prior to the reduction that was made.
But this is separate. I just wanted to understand this is not, your program is separate and these tax credit and bond programs are separate directly to the employer, and you've done something separate, which is up to $5K. Got it. Thank you.
Coach Hevron, and then Dr. Oleka, you're on deck.
Okay, thank you all. What a great presentation. I remember reading this in the newspaper. I don't know, whenever you all had the big opening, I was just so proud. I was proud for my friend Danielle, but I was more proud just for our community. I think a lot of times when we're in Frankfurt, we make a lot of decisions with just assumptions, or we make decisions based kind of on hearsay. And so I really appreciate that you all are coming from Lincoln Trail. These are workforce barriers that you all have identified in the Lincoln Trail region. But I'm going to suspect that these aren't just issues in our Lincoln Trail area. These are all across the Commonwealth. And so I appreciate that you all have taken the time to identify workforce barriers. We have 5,000 people coming to Glendale and Hardin County, on top of all the other economic development opportunities we're having in Hardin County, on top of all the other ancillary companies that will be coming from Glendale, on top of all the people we can't hire already because our workforce is so sparse. I don't know that when we drive down 31W or Ring Road, there is always a sign that says hiring, and that's not changed. So I appreciate that you all are actually looking to see, hey, this is a barrier, let's try to fix it. Just like you are with childcare, with transportation, with housing. And so I also like that you all are meeting people where they're at, because I think our workforce is changing. This isn't, our workforce has changed so much. It's generational. We've got, women entered the workforce, and then women left the workforce because of COVID. You also have people who are not getting into jobs for lifetime jobs. My generation, I've had 4 or 5 jobs already. I'm not here for, and that's okay. The previous generation, it was more of, they were looking for benefits and retirement. And now I'm looking for mobile retirement. What can I do? I need a 401k. So we're constantly having these conversations and engaging. And I think that's when we're making these decisions. We're also having to deal with a drug culture, more criminalization of things. And so I think that there's a huge stigma. Dr. Lovell, what you brought up with having a stigma with that, I would assume that there are some cases where in jobs in like hospitals or schools, you can't have a felony. And so when that shows up, that automatically marks you out. Philosophically, everyone believes differently, and that's totally okay. But if I'm going to preach that I want people to take care of themselves and not have government take care of them, I want to enable that person to do that, to take care of themselves. And so to remove that stigma and say, and I'm coming at this from a non-lawyer perspective. I've not had to try cases, so I know that, some of my colleagues have a lot different lived experiences than I do, and I respect where they're coming from for that. But I think that with the stigma, there's a much better chance that we can give them a new chance if it's a nonviolent crime. If they want to be out in the workforce and if they want to be helping be a pivotal or being a very important part of society, let's let them do that. And, kind of if we want people to take care of themselves, we need to give them the opportunity to. And I'm kind of curious if there's a correlation of expungement recidivism, because I would think that if you've gone through the process of expungement, you're not wanting to go back to jail. You're wanting to live that new life for you. And so I would be interested in that. I do have 2 questions, though, and one is, if you got to pick the amount for reducing the amount of time to wait for expungement, what would that wait period be? And I think, Julie, you mentioned like 2 years. Is there like a dream goal that you all have of what that would be, other than like tomorrow? The next day?
I think the dream is tomorrow.
Yeah.
And I guess I mentioned 2 years because at least under this program, it takes a year of employment to earn the $1,000. But obviously this program is very flexible. An employer could do, I think right now Myra has mentioned that, it'd be amazing to have an employee in some of these positions for a year. They're hopeful for 3 months. And I know like in the hospitality, leisure, the hotels in our area, they're struggling to keep somebody a month. And so for them to be able to start earning at any point in time, once they become eligible, would be great. I mean, a year out, again, there's housing barriers, there's other barriers that they have to try to overcome just to get to the point of being able to expunge. And so, I mean, I'm not sure what would be reasonable when I want 0, but 1 or 2 years, less than 5 would be great. Would be a great goal, honestly, because we want these folks, as I said, to build back their lives. And while we want every business to be open to this idea of hiring people with convictions, they're just not going to be. I mean, it's warm and fuzzy, but they're just not going to be. And you get somebody that might have the opportunity, like Timmy Michelle, to expunge, but then is she trapped in that job if she doesn't get expungement? Can she, does she have the confidence to go out and apply for other jobs just to see who's going to let her come work before expungement? And so it's just so limiting that the sooner the better, really.
I think I think we need to, of course, I'm an academic, so I'm going to say, going back to the literature, better understanding what the post-incarceration period looks like. We already know that recidivism is high across the United States, period, and a lot of that has to do with, as Julia pointed out, some of the factors. If you can't, find somewhere to live, or if you can't get hired on because of the stigma, or, all of these. Transportation is a huge issue in our region for people with coming out of jail, because they don't have a vehicle, and how are you going to get to your job and get to your interview? All of these things are interrelated. And then you add on to the fact that we're looking at a large portion of this group already starting in a place of poverty, and poverty is kind of one of those interlinking factors that tie all of that together. There was a study that just came out that I was reading just before that, and it was giving the cost of poverty on the criminal justice system and on like security in general. And I think it was like 25% of those. No, it was higher than that, and I don't want to speak out of turn, but it was a pretty significant percent of those that grew up in childhood poverty are now incarcerated. And so there are things that we can do broadly and holistically to try to impact at multiple levels, that it doesn't get us to the point where we're talking about, okay, well, we've got to get these records expunged because we've got to get people, back to work that have these barriers. So for me, it's we've got to go back to literature. We've got to understand what that timeline looks like. We know employment is one of the most important protective factors for recidivism. That we know. Absolutely, hands down. So what do we do with it?
And you can't get employed unless you have an address.
And then one last question. Has there been any conversations about removing, and I don't want, I've just, like, I was thinking about this the other day. Have there been any conversations about removing the question of being a felon on applications? And I don't know, like, that could be that could be like a policy maker. I don't know. I don't know who I need to ask that to. Maybe Senator Givens or you all.
I think someone correct me if I'm wrong, ban the box is a movement that's been talked about for years, and ban the box is the phrase to move in that direction of eliminating the question on employment. I feel like there are certain circumstances in which, and correct me again if I'm wrong, you can't ban that question. There are certain circumstances, you indicated some as it relates to the role someone may be applying for. But I think for purposes of an initial interview, the ban the box movement was a movement nationwide to try and remove that obstacle.
I can say that when we were Hardin Memorial Health, we had the question on the application, but it was I think something that Ms. Springsteen mentioned. It was an individual conversation. If a record was found, we would ask about circumstances, dates, etc. When we transitioned to Baptist Health, that they do not ask that question on their application. So as things stand today, that is not a question that is asked. It is determined after the employment offer is given. So it is employer driven.
Okay. I guess that was my question about it. Mm-hmm. And that's all I have for right now.
Very good. I have Dr. Oleka next, and then on deck for the final question is Representative Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for your presentation today. Let me say on the outset, I'm a big believer in second chance opportunities. I think in the Commonwealth of Kentucky, for different reasons, whether it's addiction-related issues or criminal justice or poverty, unfortunately, we find ourselves in a state where a lot of folks need a lot of second chances in third and fourth and beyond. So the work that you all are trying to do in that effort, I find commendable. I think it's remarkable. I think it is good, important work because it not only benefits the person, as you all mentioned in a myriad of different ways, a job opportunity in particular, benefits the workforce. Employers get new employees who are excited and interested in work, but it benefits the community as well, because if you've got people who are now contributing in a positive way, they see themselves as contributors, as producers, and then that passes on to the next generation in a way that otherwise they just wouldn't have had the opportunity to. It also helps law enforcement. For those of us who are big believers in law enforcement as a positive force for good, this allows people who have had interactions with law enforcement to hopefully not have them anymore. Now they are employed, they're working, and so members of our law enforcement can focus on folks who are, I'll politely say, not yet in that position where they want to be contributors to society. This is a benefit that can be positive all the way around. Now, Mr. Chairman, I also always try to provide something useful for our group to do, some homework for us. I think it could be beneficial. Somebody was mentioning before, I think it was Dr. Lovell, talking about the issue of how folks come out. They've got a stigma because they have some credential that is provided by a penitentiary. My institutions, I work with the independent colleges and universities. There are folks that have an interest in trying to provide education, higher education opportunities, credentials for folks who are currently incarcerated. I don't know what the statutes are around that, if there are any incentives or what that is related to for higher education, but for our commission, I think it would be useful to review those. Again, I don't know, maybe it comes up that we do nothing or that we ask the legislature to do nothing, but I think looking at potentially first what the statutes might be surrounding that for higher education, if there is an opportunity for public higher education to play a more active role just because there's a more direct relationship there, I think that could be beneficial. But for our homework purposes, I think the commission could benefit from looking at that to see what usefulness is there. I would also encourage you all, maybe you're already doing this as good researchers, thinking about a study that looks at the two types of employees, those that have had to deal with the expungement and those that have not, but looking at it from a productivity standpoint, to take away the stigma, to take away any other aspect of it. Are you good at your job? And I think if we're able to provide data that says that it's equal or there's some proficiency or whatever, I think that could help employers from the stigma standpoint as well. To say if you hire people, again, assuming the data come back positive or at least neutral, you hire somebody who has had a justice-involved background, you don't get any worse work product. In fact, you might even get a better one. They might be a little bit more excited about the fact they've got the opportunity to work. I don't know what the data will show us, but I think that would be an interesting follow-up study to do. Question. You all obviously an employer, Western to be sure, but Baptist Health Hardin. Baptist is part of a broader network. Is there any interest in expanding this particular program across the network? Maybe you can't answer that one. Or then also different hospital networks across the state through the Hospital Association or something like that.
We have, I would say, fairly recently touted the good work that we started. COVID hit and disrupted everything. And so I think we've had to revisit really being able to share the work that we've done. We've tried to talk at every opportunity about the program that we offer. I'm still somewhat new to Baptist Health Hardin and to being part of something larger. So although I'm no longer in human resources, I still have contacts. And so it's a matter of making sure that they know that the program exists and how it can be of benefit. I suspect that once we can have some other examples come to the top, there'd be more to share. I feel fairly confident that the other hospitals, if it would open the door to employees that would stay long-term, and by long-term I mean 12 months, not longer than that in today's world, then I feel certain that they would be open to it. Across other hospitals, honestly, I've been somewhat disappointed at the lack of interest by employers, period, businesses, period, in asking questions about the work that we did. Maybe there's a Pollyanna part of me, but when we rolled this out and had our first example and went in with Timmy, and we did some initial PR communications, I just expected to be so busy with questions and interest and, come talk to our HR person about instituting this program at our employer. I just thought we'd be so busy with speaking engagements, that we wouldn't know what to do with ourselves, but that just never came to fruition. And again, I hate to blame everything on COVID, but that did disrupt quite a lot. But my hope is that with renewed interest, renewed need to revisit how employers find their workforce, that we will start to get those questions and those requests, and perhaps with your help, we can inspire others to offer the same. And so that's the work still to be done.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Representative Brown, final question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess it's up to me to bring it home.
Bring it home.
Thank you all so much for your presentation. It was it's certainly eye-opening, and it's something that my predecessor before me, and in the 8 years since I've been here in the General Assembly, has been an issue across the board for the people in our community that have committed a felony. And it's like that red letter, they got a red letter on their forehead that says felony, or red F. And it means that this society, this community, this state has barriers that they have to overcome, and there is no assistance or help for them. And what you all are expressing, I think, is critical and important. And I'd like to throw something out that I've heard over and over and over again. The Kentucky Chamber of Commerce constantly talks about workforce issues. We don't have people. There's a workforce problem in our state. And until we start to do things differently in terms of incarceration and how we treat ex-felons, and to get away from recidivism so that people have an opportunity. Right now, people don't have one. And we continue to shackle them with the issues that they face. And I'd like to bring to bring note to the name of this commission, Commission on Race and Access to Opportunities. A lot of what people out there are simply wanting is access to opportunity. And we continue to do the same thing that we've always done. And Senator Westerfield and other people that work in the profession, in the criminal justice profession. I'm not in the criminal justice profession. I'm an advocate. And I think that people out there, the people that I see, that cannot get an opportunity, just simply to put their past behind them so that they can go forward. This program with the expungement and the fact that the expungement bill that passed here in Kentucky, we put additional fees on, and we put a period of time, 5 years, after they've completed their sentence and paid all restitution. They have to wait 5 years before their record can be expunged. There's something that it says in the Bible, and I will close with this. But for the grace of God, there go I. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well done. Appreciate your passion for this work. Appreciate the model you're creating and sharing, and continue to be Pollyanna. Don't stop doing that. Continue that passion, continue that work. Thank you for taking the time to be here today and share your testimony with us. Yes. And on the subject of thank you for time and commitment and passion, we're excited to have our next presenter here at the Commission. Continuing on this theme of justice, we welcome to the table representatives from the Wanda, Joyce, Robertson Foundation to speak about the services they provide to the community. I think there may be more of you than there are chairs, but there are plenty of chairs you can bring forward to slide up to the table. We're honored to have you here. We appreciate the exciting work you're doing, and we appreciate you taking time out of your schedules to be here and share your testimony with us. So with that, if each of you would start by introducing yourself for the record, and then move directly into your testimony, and you can start wherever you wish, but just make sure everyone gets introduced. Thank you. Little button right there in the middle. Green light on.
Okay, it's on.
Excellent.
All right. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Madam Chairman, and the members of the commission. My name is Dale Robertson. I'm the co-founder and the visionary of the Wanda Joyce Robertson Foundation.
Thank you. Thought it was green. We are grateful for the opportunity to share with you. My name is Amy Snow, and I'm a co-founder and acting executive director of the Wanda Joyce Robinson Foundation.
Good evening. My name is Cassandra Brown, and I am a participant of the Wanda Joyce Foundation.
Good evening. My name is Xavier Brown, and I'm a part of the Wanda Joyce Robinson Foundation.
Good evening. My name is Noreen, and I am a part.
The Wanda Joyce Robertson Foundation was founded in 2018, actually 4 years ago to this month. Our organization is composed of an incredible team of board and advisory council members, several of whom are present today. These individuals are heroes in their own right: our chief of police, social workers, educators, mental health providers, juvenile justice folks, court-designated workers, the Kentucky Chamber of Commerce, mental health providers, Kentucky State University, and also individuals with lived justice experience. We truly believe in the word family in the sense of bridging gaps and bringing people to the table so that healing justice can occur and so that families can be strengthened. So who are we? Combined, we're a 21-member board and advisory council. We actually have 7 part-time contract positions and 2 University of Kentucky social work interns. To date, we have 0 full-time staff. However, we received a phone call this morning. Last spring, the Franklin County Fiscal Court presented a grant application on our behalf to the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention, and we were informed this morning that we are recipients of that grant. So what's the issue? Kentucky's incarceration rate is more than double the national average. 12% of Kentucky children and youth impacted. I will spotlight Franklin County. We are actually able to capture real numbers through our school system during our online school registration, in which we directly ask, is the child in your home impacted by incarceration? We see that number coming in right in at 11%, comparable to our state average. I will say that this number, in my opinion, is conservative. It does not account for additional people that our children may view in a parental role, a sibling, a bonus parent. It also does not include parents under other forms of court supervision. So what do? We certainly support visitation with incarcerated parents. We're able to host contact visitation in our local county jail. One of our part-time paid positions, we have someone who provides video visitation support that they meet weekly with the children so that those visits can occur. We also give our families gas cards so that they can travel to facilities outside of Franklin County. So how do we tackle this issue? You know, what exactly is going on here? With our families, we're able to provide a monthly caregiver support group. We offer parent cafes. That's part of the Be Strong Families National Program. We have quarterly family fellowship events. We provide assistance with basic needs.
Which comes to me. Again, Cassandra Brown. These are my children. They are a part of the Wanda Joyce Foundation. We have been a part of the Wanda Joyce Foundation for 4 years. I remember when we were in a gym with nothing. We love the fact that, I personally, as a mom, love the fact that they have someone that they can look up to. She has a mentor. He has a mentor. They speak with their mentors daily. I love the fact that I can have people that deal with the same issues that I deal with, that I can speak with them, we relate, talk about our issues, talk about our children's issues, and discuss a plan on how to deal with those issues. I'm proud of them, honestly. I'm really proud of them, proud of myself, proud of how far we've come. So that's what I like about the Wanda Joyce Foundation.
Strengthening families is a priority for our organization. We maintain ongoing conversation with our local DCBS office. We know that on any given day, roughly 150 parents are incarcerated in Franklin County. An implication here, the clock starts ticking. We know that parents have 12 months to work a case plan, with permanency being determined at the 15th month. We have many mothers and fathers sitting in county jail, many of whom remain in jail because they do not have the financial resources to bond, to post bond, to pay additional court fees, and that clock continues to tick. We are advocating today for alternatives in sentencing. Another implication, parenting classes are only offered to state inmates. They're not offered to general population. We know that DCBS offices are overwhelmed, to say the least. However, parents who are incarcerated are often left out of sight and out of mind. Efforts are not being made for visitation and reunification to occur. The Kentucky Youth Advocates 2021 report indicates that certainly race is a factor here, with minority children entering the foster care system at a much higher rate. Dale and I truly believe that Wanda Joyce can be a model program for how families impacted by incarceration can be supported and strengthened across the state. Kids Rising Up Through Support and Healing is a pre-kindergarten through 12th grade social emotional curriculum that was developed by 2 Kentucky educators in Greenup County. We have been able to implement the CRUSH program in every elementary and middle school in Franklin and Anderson County. We have over 200 children attending this program weekly, and I'll tell you, for our school year, we're just getting started. Most of our groups will start back after fall break. An unexpected caveat of COVID was that the founders of the program, Jelena Wheeler and Christy Whitaker, were able to train over 450 educators across the state of Kentucky and beyond. All of this work, volunteer efforts by educators and our board. Again, using Franklin County as an example, we are looking at close to 800 children at that 11% mark who qualify for a CRUSH. The implication here is our local schools need 2, 3, 4, and 5 CRUSH programs in their school to meet the demand. We cannot expect our teachers to cover that. We would like to see support at the state level to assist with the implementation of a statewide CRUSH program. And I will put a plug in here. Greenup County is seeing a 60% improvement in state testing scores for their students who participate in CRUSH.
Okay, so what I'm going to be talking about is what I like about CRUSH. So I like to be able to go in there and discuss how I feel without being judged or feeling like I'm judged, or being worried about what other people would think about me, or being worried that I'm the only one in there that has an incarcerated parent. And another thing that I like is how like I watch some of the quietest kids in school go from being so quiet to being one of like the loudest kids in school, and being able to discuss their feelings and just being more expressive and not so like hiding themselves. Another thing that I like is that you make more friends in CRUSH. Every year there's a new amount of people that join, and every year I end up with like 10 times more friends because of CRUSH, and that's one of my favorite parts about CRUSH.
I'm in high school, so I'm a part of the high school outreach program. I attend Franklin County High School. And something I like about it is like I get to meet with kids my own age and hang out with them, and see what it's like from kids even older than me to younger than me, like the middle schoolers. And everyone's really helpful, especially my mentor. My mentor, he's always there trying to make an effort to be that male role model that I didn't have growing up. And when I'm with that group of people, it's more comforting, and it makes me feel not alone when I'm with them. So that's really a big part.
As Xavier discussed, we offer a weekly mentoring program for our high school youth. The success here is incredible. Connections are being made, and we truly believe that we are breaking the chain of generational incarceration, poverty, as well as reducing our high school dropout rates. In our Franklin County example, we know that about 30% of the highest tiered students in our state persistence to graduation report are impacted by incarceration. 30%. That's 30% that could be removed from the top of that list with supports like what we are talking about today. I would like to shift focus a bit to families impacted by substance use. A social worker on our team has recently met at the local and state level regarding the lack of adequate mental health and substance use treatment programs, particularly for adolescents in need of SUD treatment and who also have parents in active addiction. We know that incarceration and addiction often go hand in hand. Our kids are not getting high for fun or to experiment. They are getting high to numb themselves from the trauma they live in each day. And we're seeing that at the middle school level and below, 4th and 5th grades. Prevention has got to start early elementary. There's a crucial need for school-based health investments so that districts can attract and sustain qualified mental health providers. The need is absolutely daunting, and we must intentionally engage and activate resources. One of our key reasons for being here today is to seek support for a Bill of Rights of children of the incarcerated. We have 12% in Kentucky. Why don't we have a bill for our children? We provided an example from Oregon, and today's been an emotional day with that announcement. I'm not a crier, but every time I read these statements out loud, I do cry, so I'm passing it to Dale.
Well, we're going to start with the first one. To be protected from additional trauma at the time of parental arrest, to be informed of the arrest in an age of appropriate manner, to hear and respect, to be here and respected by decision makers when decisions are made about the child, to be considered when decisions are made about the parent, to be cared for in the absence of the child's parent in a way that prioritizes the child's physical, emotional, mental needs, to speak with, see, touch an incarcerated parent, to be informed about the local services and programs that can provide support to the child, to not be judged, labeled, or blamed for the parent's incarceration, and to have lifelong relationships with their incarcerated parent. And these Bill of Rights are something that I actually have really touched me, because before we get to the full thing about the Bill of Rights, let's talk about how we got here. How we got here is that I spent 10 years in federal prison. That's how we got here. I left 2 boys out to fend for themselves. Without the right mentors, without the right support of the community, my kids probably went down the same road as I went down. Because it goes back to breaking the generational curse. My father went to prison. I didn't have support, so I ended up going to prison. My brothers went to prison. But I made sure that I stayed in contact with my kids while I was in prison. I made sure that I was very honest and upfront about what I did so my kids can know and understand what I did to go to prison, that they don't have to go that route. And I always told them my dreams about what I was going to do when I got out. And I stuck to those dreams, meaning that when I got out, I said I was going to work at a gym and get a job and, and open up my own gym. But it really didn't go that way. I had to check the box. No gym will hire me. So what I do, open up my own gym in my garage with 3 people. And this woman here was one of the 3 people that came to my gym in my garage, and now I have 2, and we're on the way to open up 3. And we have a franchise. I'm a speaker. I'm an author, and this is why the Wanda Joyce Robertson Foundation is so prevalent, is that these kids need to see and know that they're special. They need to know that this is because their mom or their dad or whatever, somebody in their household or their immediate family went to prison. Does not mean that's their destination. So our job is to teach them that they're special. And we have to expose them to something different other than incarceration. So I have 2 boys, and I'm just grateful that they had the right support. So one is a criminal justice major from EKU, and the other one plays for the New York Giants. So it can be done, but we just got to come together as a state, not just Frankfurt, not just Lexington, not just Louisville. We have to come together as a state to make this work. We have to take that number down. We need to bring that number down. And how do we do that? We come together. We put one in every city in Kentucky. We need funding. We have the infrastructure. We have the team. We have the vision, but we just don't have the funding. But we also need a Bill of Rights so these kids can be connected with their parents, because I was just blessed that I had 2 boys that the mother was allowed me to be able to keep that connection with them. And I still had a communication. I still had an imprint on their life. And, sometimes some parents might not like that the dad went to prison. So the child is not able to have that contact with his dad. She does not know that's creating trauma within itself. So this is why these kids need a Bill of Rights. Same way, don't we have a Bill of Rights for foster kids? They are in the same boat. What's any different? So we need a Bill of Rights for these kids, but we also need Wanda Joyce Robertson Foundation in every city in Kentucky, because it goes like this. And I'm a firm believer in this. Dysfunctional families create dysfunctional families create dysfunctional individuals. Dysfunctional individuals create dysfunctional communities. And how we stop from the dysfunctional family, we put the Wanda Joyce Robertson Foundation there to stop it. Not saying we're going to save every kid, but we can save a lot of kids, though. And that's one thing we can do. But we can't do it by ourselves. We don't have enough manpower. We only have funding, for real. But we get it done.
Compelling testimony.
Thank you.
Very compelling testimony. Anything else in your presentation before we go to Q&A?
Not at this time.
Excellent. Well spoken. You should be very proud of these 2 children as well. They're eloquent. They're composed. They're poised. He was even your brother and sister, I presume.
Yes.
He even had some pride in his sister as she was speaking. I looked at him smiling at her. He was proud of you. It was well done, and very well done across the board. Compelling testimony. Thank you for the work that the foundation is doing. And Senator Westerfield, I believe you have the first question.
Thank you, Chairman. It's actually about the Bill of Rights. I really like that whole list, but a couple of things that popped in my mind was whether or not Oregon addresses what happens if what the parent is being charged or arrested with involves the child. For instance, the very last bullet point there, I firmly believe in maintaining a healthy relationship.
No sex offenders.
Okay, so there's some exclusions there.
Yes.
It's easy for me to point to examples where the kinds of charges or the kinds of, even if that isn't the charge, there could be circumstances where the relationship with the parent may not be the best. I've been the guardian ad litem for the children in cases where one comes to mind where a mother was given 2 or 3 years of chances, and every time she was given another chance, she put the children in harm's way every single time. So I'm wondering if they allow for that. And then secondly, related to this, if they put any funding behind this, if you're aware of in Oregon from the state. And the reason that I asked that was the 5th bullet down, to be cared for in the absence of the child's parent in a way that prioritizes the child's physical, mental, and emotional needs. I fully support that, but that comes with a price tag. for providers for whether it's behavioral health or fill in the blank provider. So I'm wondering if Oregon put any money to this. Do you know if they did?
I'm not aware of that. First, thank you for your question. And certainly, each family has their own individual story, their own individual path. Locally, just within Franklin County, we maintain very good communication with our local DCBS office. So, those decisions are individualized. Dale mentioned sexual abuse or, other crimes that are very concerning. And so we, just in our discussion, we are able to look at, if that child's in care, are the rights of that parent, have they been terminated? And if they have not been terminated, is there any child abuse or neglect charge against that parent?
I'm sorry to interrupt. Do you all track with what DCBS's goals are, or do you ever differ from DCBS? Because when TPR hasn't happened, I can think of 1,000 situations where the charge doesn't involve abuse of that kid, but because of the criminal conduct, there's a DNA action for dependency, neglect, or abuse.
Yes. So for every child that we do any type of visitation, communication with, all of that is screened through DCBS. So we get prior approval before we do any of that. But the conversations that we're having are just really, really positive. Our local office admits that they can do better, that, they lack resources within themselves to be able to wrap support around that child and parent bond. That's something that we've been in discussion about, that, when we're able to hire full-time social workers, which is coming very shortly, that our staff would be able to facilitate and nurture some of those visitation with the parent.
You said, do they have, it comes with a price tag, do they have funding behind it, right? It may come with a price tag.
And let me say, it's worth any money it would cost.
Right.
I was just curious if they put in it. If we did it, I'd want us to put money in it.
Right. Because I was about to say, if we don't put money in it, we're going to put money in one way or the other.
You already knew it. I wasn't worried about you. Thank you, Chairman.
You're welcome, Senator Westerfield. Dr. Oleka.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay, I've got different thoughts. I'm going to go through the same kind of protocol I went with before. General comments, I want to provide some homework for our commission, then I've got a question. First, let me start with you. Thank you for what you're doing. The criminal justice system can break down men. You refused to be broken. That's a powerful thing that I don't think a lot of people understand. 10 years. You came out, you became an entrepreneur, you stayed in contact with your family, with your kids that entire time. That says a lot about you, good brother, and the kind of man that you are. That's important for people to know and understand.
Thank you.
Because you took that experience and you're trying to make lives better. You got a boy in the NFL. There are a lot of dads who have never had your story who would kill for that kind of situation. So you have done fantastic work with the hand that you've been dealt. Thank you for what you've done. Same thing with you, Mom. To be the kind of woman that has that kind of strength, to take the 2 kids that you have, to be able to put all that energy into this program, to raise them up right. They can't be the great kids that they are, to come in front of this committee in big old Frankfurt in this room without a mother like you. It's important that they hear somebody else say that, because I know you probably try to let them know in different ways every day. Now if somebody else is saying it to you, you got a great mom, let me say that. Thank you for doing that kind of work. And again, putting that energy into an organization like this, because it's important. You've been doing it for 4 years. A lot of families' lives have been changed because of that effort. Now to you all as kids, as young people, you all have incredible talent in front of you. Each of you are incredibly talented. To be able to be this focused for this long, to sit in a room like this, says that you all have incredible talent to where one day, I think, if you wanted to be, you could be on this side of the panel. Either as an elected official like some of these folks or a regular old citizen like me, I think that you all could do it. I want you all to keep that in your mind about what's possible for you, because at some point in time, you can be in a position to directly change and impact laws in a way that could impact positively your generation, my generation, and generations to come after you all. I want you all to remember that and think about that, what's possible for you on this side. The one issue I'll take with you is that you went to Franklin County, I went to Western Hills. That's the one issue. That's the one issue that you got. Some inside Frankfurt stuff there. Okay, question for you, Amy. Well, before I get there, commission resources, I think what we could do, part of what our job is to put together studies that could be beneficial, a type of studies, a literature review, basically other resources that could be available for this particular field. I think it might be appropriate for the commission to try to find additional grant opportunities that might make sense for the Wanda Joyce Robinson Foundation, whether it is in state government or just outside in the private sector, that you all could use to be beneficial for the work that you're trying to do to expand. The legislature obviously will have important questions to make on this type of thing, a Bill of Rights, but there is private funding out there or already appropriated state and federal and government funding. So it may be beneficial for this commission to put together a study of what those resources could be to be useful to you, which then goes to my question. How much money do you think you would need in order to get that dream of a statewide entity, or at least a network of entities in each city? What is that resource like?
So, well, that's definitely something that I would need to discuss with our board, just so that we put that type of information on paper. Are y'all shaking back there? But we are certainly up to that. I mean, that's the vision that we have, particularly with Crush. It was an elementary guidance school counselor and a special ed teacher who worked for Russell. They continue to work for Russell Independent Schools. They were visiting their loved one in their county jail. One of their mothers is in and out her entire life. And another woman, it was her son who was incarcerated. And so when they were there, just having the heart of an educator and seeing their children, their students, trying to visit their parents, they thought, gosh, we need to meet with our kids. And that's very organically just how it started 5 years ago. And so after their first year of the program, there was just a little article written up in the Kentucky Educator electronic newsletter, and I read it. I immediately called them and said, I need you all to come to Frankfurt and train some of our teachers, because we're working with, we're a startup nonprofit. We have over 400 kids and no staff. What do? And I work for our school district. So let's take it to our where rubber meets the road with our kids. But then when you look at that type of information, that it's 11% of your school or 12%, 13%, 800 kids, how do we really make that happen? So we would certainly welcome any resources, discussion to be able to look at implementing a statewide Crush program. Over the summer, actually, Naraya and her mother went with me to the Kentucky Association of School Administrators conference. So all, superintendents across the state were present, and out of that, several districts, several of them had been trained through COVID, but then just the implementation hadn't happened. And so we're getting calls and emails every day for school districts wanting that type of support. Well, I work a full-time job in my own school district, so we don't have that type of support. Christy and Jelena work a full-time job. They don't have, the ability to do what is in their heart to do. For the record, I'll say I graduated from Western Hills.
All right. All right.
So, and Dale and I kind of knew each other from South Frankfurt.
Wandale graduated from
Wandale graduated from Western Hills.
Look, that's how we became good at football, taking on them hits from people at county.
Right.
That's what it was. Thank you all. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We're on the edge of parochialism here, so let's rein ourselves in just a little. This has been a great committee meeting. Thank you all for your testimony. And I would encourage all committee members, in the packet is a nice product that they've put together, their strategic plan. And if you look at that strategic plan, Dr. Oleka, you ask about budget. Toward the end, I think about 3 pages from the very end, they've got an elaborate budget, well laid out, details about the programming they do, minimal administrative cost, wonderfully well done. I also want to compliment you all on the board that you got together. You've got a broad group of stakeholders that are actively engaged. I see attorneys, I see school members, school leaders, Department of Juvenile Justice, AOC, DCBS. Kudos to the work that you're doing very intentionally with a goal in mind, and keep up that great work. Committee, thank you for your presence here today. We are going to be adjourning soon, but before we do, I'd like to remind everyone that our next meeting of the commission, which was originally scheduled for the 26th, is in the process of being rescheduled to the 27th so that we can attend the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Conference on the 26th. Thank you all again for being here. And
Thank you.
With that, Representative Brown, you wish to be recognized before we adjourn.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a question. I was thinking that your son did graduate from Western Hills, and so that's important. But I want to know, who is Wanda Joyce Robinson? She happened to be your mother?
Yes, Wanda Joyce Robertson is my mother. We named it after her. Well, we all came up with it because she used to work at Kentucky State University, and some kids would come to school and they only had money for like room and books, but they didn't have money for food. So she would still feed them, regardless if they had money or not. And like, she basically put her job on the line to make sure the kids was fed.
Did she work in the cafeteria?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, that's kids need that.
Yes.
Along the way, I thought that might have been your mother.
Yes.
And black mothers of black kids have a way. I remember my mother. I never was able to name something for her or put something in place. But
it's never too late.
This is awesome. Yes.
It's not too late.
It isn't. It absolutely is not.
You just gotta get started, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Done's better than perfect.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Thank you all again, and
Thank
this
you, Mr.
meeting
Chair.
stands adjourned.